Welcome back. You're listening to Politics Uncensored with me, Zoe Grunewald.
And me, Ali Milani.
With local elections coming up here in the UK, parties are doubling down on their stance on affordable housing, and particularly the issue of leasehold. The Labour Party pledged in their 2024 manifesto that they would abolish the so-called feudal agreements. But so far, progress has been slow. Joining us to talk about this is the founder Free Leaseholders, a grassroots campaign for the abolition of leasehold, Harry Scoffin. Hello, Harry.
Thanks for covering this story.
Briefly for our listeners, what is leasehold?
It's basically the biggest organised scam in the UK today. So you buy a home, normally it will be a flat, and you don't actually own it. So you gain a landlord. And we're literally the only countries left in the world, England and Wales, where you don't actually outright own that flat. And the landlord is something far more powerful than any landlord in the private rented sector. Because if he basically rips you off on service charges, which is supposed to be for the running of a building, you can't sell the flat. And that's what's happening in the UK property market today. All these young people, a lot of them first-time buyers, in their mid-30s, late 30s, they can't sell their homes now because of this sort of property mafia.
Just so we can explain it to everyone, sorry, because I thought I understood this. So you buy a property, you think it's yours.
Yes.
Who is then the landlord and why are they the landlord?
So it's like a freeholder, and that can be an offshore company. It might be a sort of on the nation company, but it's also historically used to be the church, you know, the monarchy, all of those interests. But basically these guys own the freeholds as an investment opportunity. So they're there to extract.
So who's my money going to when I buy it?
The money's going to the freeholder. No, right. So when you buy it, it'll go to the developer, it will go to the person that is the leaseholder that you bought from if it's a second time purchase.
So I'm paying a bunch of money for the right to be a tenant.
Correct. So you own it. You might even technically own it for 999 years, but under the law, you've got a landlord. So you don't actually fully control that property.
And who is that landlord most of the time?
Offshore companies.
Well, like
BVI, Monaco, shell companies. And that's what's happened in the last 10 to 15 years. Really predatory interests have bought up these freeholds to jack up the service charge. They make commissions on things like buildings insurance. And what's happened is it's basically become organised crime. And what's happened is these hugely powerful interests have lobbyists, corporate interests that are there to basically manipulate politicians to stop them delivering what people vote for in the elections. And it is a little bit like a Brexit rerun. The will of the people and the elites and Parliament all the time, 1880s, they've been talking about getting rid of the system before working men and women had the right to vote in this country. And yet they don't do it. And what's so fascinating is Labour got so many people's votes at the last election off this one issue alone. Lifelong Conservatives, people that voted Lib Dem, all the rest of it, went for Labour because of this issue. And now they're saying it's too complicated. And the freeholders are claiming that reforms that were passed by the last Conservative government are against their human rights. That's the comedy of it. So they're using human rights law, the Human Rights Act, to stop a Labour government from switching on a law that was brought forward by Michael Gove. So what this government are doing, they're talking about a new bit of legislation. That's not going to be happening till the end of the Parliament. And chances are they won't even switch that thing on because they'll be sued over that piece of legislation. So what's happening is they're kicking the can, just like the last Conservative government did. They left it till the last minute, just a few minutes before an election, and then they say, oh, vote us in and we'll finish the job. And they're not going to do it. Right. And that's what's happened with Zach Polansky and the Greens. He's set up the Green Party, platform for the local elections, and it was a big housing platform. But in there, he said, Labour's lied to people. They've lied to people over abolishing leasehold. They're not doing it. Right. Vote for us. And that's what we find so fascinating. We're not hearing from Nigel Farage. We're not hearing from Kemi Badenoch. We're not hearing from Ed Davey. All of these leaders that need to basically build new audiences. They need to build a voter coalition. They're not talking about this issue.
So there'll be people listening to this show. Quite a lot of our listeners are younger.
Yes.
So they might not be on the housing market yet. They might be renters, but they might be thinking one day about buying a flat.
Yeah.
There's a good chance that they'll become a leaseholder, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So tell our listeners who are thinking about buying a flat, or maybe one day would like to buy a flat if they can, what sort of issues this might cause. You talked about ground rent, service charge. Just explain those a little bit and maybe tell us some of the most drastic cases you've heard of how people can be ripped off.
Yeah, so basically the problem with leasehold, and this is why actually for those lucky enough to buy a home now, they're obviously older, sort of mid to late 30s. For the first time buyers, they're skipping flats altogether. That's from Barclays Bank, because what they're realising is that you'd much rather hold on a bit longer work even harder to be able to afford a deposit, get the mortgage on a home whose running costs you do control.
Yes.
As
So you'd be the
opposed to,
freeholder.
You'll be the freeholder of a house. And that's the thing. Scotland and the rest of the world, when you buy a flat, you're a freeholder of your individual flat. But because of all these vested interests, you're not in England, Wales. So the thing is, we all go on about landlords in the private rented sector. These guys, these freeholder landlords are far more powerful. And the reason why is the home is the single biggest purchase of your life. This can actually completely transform your life trajectory, whether you even have children. So we did polling with Opinium, the polling agency, last year, and they found that 56% of Londoners who are in leaseholds say that the system has stopped them from having a family.
Wow.
Now that's 43% out in the country at large. So the problem is these charges are not for the running of a building. It's all about enriching the freeholders and the managing agents. So ground rent's a good one. That's been an issue that there's been always a push for reform on. That isn't for running a building. That is pure profit to the landlord.
Can I ask a couple of questions quickly? Any other country do this nonsense?
No.
We're
England
the only
and Wales
ones.
are literally the only ones where they've got a private investor that owns the freeholds, 2 blocks of flats.
Makes me feel really special. And do they have any responsibility? So usually in the private rented, at least the landlord has responsibilities of making sure the home is habitable.
Yeah.
Do they have any?
They're supposed to insure the building. They're supposed to maintain the building. But the problem is, it doesn't matter what the law says or even the leasehold agreement. So long as they know that they can rip you off, they will. Because the only choice you've got is to spend your life being a serial litigator. Most people don't have the money to get these barristers involved. And that's the problem. These freeholders, they're getting King's Counsel, the creme de la creme lawyers, to go and basically fight the little leaseholders to basically keep screwing them. So that's a huge issue. And what's happening, it's not just in London, but across England, Wales now, biggest gap between house and flat prices in 30 years. So the thing is that if you buy a flat, what we're finding with many of our supporters is that they can never move to a house because they can't. Basically, the value of the property is plummeted, so you are not going to be able to have a family, even if you can afford it.
Would you advise people, like if there are young people listening, which there will be, as Zoe mentioned, would you advise people not to buy?
Boycott a leasehold flat, and it's terrible for our supporters that are in these flats that want to offload them and get out of it. The thing is that there should be a health warning. Until the government actually abolishes a system, which is what they promised, don't do it, because it's become a debt trap. Just buy a house, even though it's going to take longer. And people, all my friends say, but I want to buy something, I want to have equity. And the point is, put your money into stocks and shares. I'm not a financial advisor, but the thing is, you're going to get a better return. So in London, very quickly, 60% of all properties sold last year were leasehold flats, but they made up a staggering 90% of all losses.
Wow.
So that's not happening on houses. That's a leasehold flats phenomenon. And yet the government say it's too difficult. And they've got the second biggest majority in Labour's 126-year history.
Tell us what policies have been promised and taken away. You spoke about the Conservatives. Now we've got a Labour government that's falling back on its promises. You spoke about the Greens. Just take us through what has been said, what has been pledged, and what has been broken.
So in the manifesto of the Labour Party, which got them to power, they said that they were going to end the feudal leasehold system. Now that's obviously a very high-level principle, but it means getting rid of it, not just for future homes, but existing ones. But the key bit of detail that gets missed in a lot of the reporting is they made other commitments as part of that pledge, and it was to bring forward these Law Commission reports from 2020. Huge reports. They spent years working on them, public consultations, on something called enfranchisement, to buy out the landlord so you could become the freeholder yourself of a block of flats with your neighbours, and then you can take back control, to sort of coin a phrase. And then another scheme called right to manage, which isn't as good as buying out your freeholder, but it's cheaper and it allows you to get control of the service charges. Those aren't in the bill that Labour published on the 27th of January, the draft Common Hold and Leasehold Reform Bill. Now they claim they're still committed to it. I wasn't born yesterday. If it's not in a bill that is supposed to become the law soon, it's not going to happen, because we're getting close to a general election. And what's happening is all these very, very powerful interests, they have lobbyists. And these people are paid tens of thousands of pounds a month to brief producers, to brief MPs, peers against our campaign to stop this from happening. And what's happening is we're doing it for free. And these videos are going huge on TikTok, Instagram, because they can't control it. They can't control our campaign. And we're not there for OBEs. We're not there to be friends with politicians. We want this done. And what's so interesting is that a lot of the work was done by these Law Commission reports, and yet the government is saying it's not going to be one for this bill. Why not? And on something called ground rent, in opposition, Labour were 100% correct to attack the Conservatives for not getting rid of ground rents, because ground rents is money for nothing. It's not to maintain a building. It's literally pure profit to the freeholder. And Michael Gove wanted to reduce it to a peppercorn, which is zero financial value. It didn't happen, partly because of the early election, but there was some compromise that was going to be reached between him and Rishi Sunak that there would be a cap of £250 a year and it would go to zero after 20 years. But Labour are doing it in 40 years. So in 2068, we'll get rid of a money for nothing scam, but we'll basically have flying cars before that time. So feudalism's continuing under Labour. And they're all supposed to be for the working man, taking on the aristocracy, the establishment interests. Keir Hardie, Keir Starmer, that's where his name comes from. Keir Hardie was all about taking on the freeholders, the landlords, stopping leasehold. And yet, a government that is desperate for something popular right now, in a cost of living emergency, they're not doing it. And they're saying it's difficult. And what's happening is that we're a thorn in the side of the government. I've been blocked by the Housing Minister, Matthew Pennycook. That is weird behaviour.
It is.
Is he going to do that to the freeholders? Probably not.
I once misspelt his name, Matthew Pennycook. You can imagine what I spelled it as. It was,
Yes.
I 100% a mistake,
error.
but I think he's pretty annoyed at me ever since. How long are these leaseholds usually?
Can be 99 years, 125 years, can go as far as 999 years. But the problem is, if the service charge is so high, which is what's happening, they're being ratcheted up, it doesn't matter about the lease length. But you're right.
But can you also get leaseholds on houses as well?
You can. So that's what happened sort of early 2010s with Help to Buy. There was sort of Tory donors that were benefiting from the ground rents and the freeholds on these leasehold houses. And then people that have got no money were being told, okay, you can buy the house and we'll give you the freehold after 2 years. And then they would quadruple the price. So instead of it being £10,000, it would be 30, even £80,000.
And they can put up ground rent or service charge after you've bought the...
Well, with the ground rent, it's supposed to be set in the lease, but I've seen a lot of leases where it's actually quite silent on that and they can jack it up. But with the service charges, they can absolutely just double it, quadruple it, and that's what we're seeing.
What the hell is ground rent? It's such a ludicrous...
But it shows the feudal... Yeah. You're absolutely right, Harry. Obviously, it shows how feudal our system around land in this country is still, because huge portions... I mean, we heard about this last week when we were talking about who owns London, but just huge portions of our land are still owned by... and the king as well. He owns loads of
It's
the
this sort of institutionalised inequality that you have to pay a little tithe, as it were, to the sort of person that really owns the land. And that's what's
you're
so
lucky
interesting.
to live there,
And they're now suing the government for breach of their human rights. The government, to their credit, to put in an incredible performance last summer in the High Court. They won in October, and yet the Court of Appeal has just given the freeholders a green light to do it again. And that's bizarre. Because
I'm feeling very French Revolution right now.
I just
join the campaign, absolutely.
Well, so let's, because we've got to wrap up shortly,
Yes.
but just tell us about what the Green Party are doing.
Yeah.
And then tell us about where our listeners who are feeling equally as pumped as we all are now and irritated with Matthew Pennycook, how they can support the campaign.
So basically what the Greens are doing is they've realised there's so many of these leaseholders are downwardly mobile graduates in London, but also other cities. And actually they used to vote Labour. So to cannibalise Labour's core vote in these local elections, what you do is go on a cost of living emergency, which is what is happening to leaseholders right now. And that's what Zach Polanski's done. It's very, very good politics. They're committed to abolishing the system. We'll obviously have to wait for the manifesto at the next general election. And we want to work with him and the Greens, absolutely. But in terms of how people can support our campaign, go to our website, www.freeleaseholders.org.uk, join the rebellion, because this story isn't going away. And we're really grateful that you're covering it, and we hope you can cover it again, because there are so many different ways of cutting it. It is about will of the people. There's this whole argument about ECHR. It's supposed to protect the little guy, and yet these big capital interests, offshore interests, property mafia, are using it to stop the little guy from being free. And that's the thing. That's what we're fighting for. And actually, people say to us we're being unreasonable, people involved in the government. No. All we're asking you to do is deliver what you promised in the manifesto. And that's why people are going to the political extremes, because they feel all these governments say the right thing to get into power, and then they don't do it. And then they get told it's too complicated.
Do you hear the people?
I know. I'm absolutely right. Harry, thank you so much. We'll definitely be following along with your campaign.
Yeah, I think this is evidence. By the way, if my wife is listening, this is evidence that we don't need to buy a flat. We need to put all our money into comic books.
Stocks and shares.
Yeah.
Or comic books.
Because literally, you're burning money if you buy leasehold property. It's just not worth it.
Harry, thank you
Harry.
so much. That was Harry Scoffin, housing campaign and founder of Free Leaseholds.